Just wanted to call the meeting to order in absence of the chair, so I'll turn it over shortly. The first item of business is late items, and we do have one which was circulated as an addendum, which is the Regional District of Nanaimo Recreation Facility and Sports Field 2023 Usage Report, which is in addition to Tom Osborne's report. And so a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Thank you. And on to the presentations. And the first item is... And this is the terms of reference and selection of chair and alternate chair.
So do you want to do the chair first, or do you want to do the terms of reference?
Sure, and then we can turn the meeting over to the chair.
Right.
Can I nominate someone?
Absolutely.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Yanfor for chair.
I'll second that.
Very much.
Sorry, in the right.
I'm Vanessa, by the way. All right, all in favor? Carried. And alternate chair, does anybody want to propose a motion?
Sorry, do you want to? I'd like to propose that Lauren Melanson take vice chair. Area C.
Okay, all in favor? Carried. Turn it over to the chair now.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Robertson, and thanks everybody for being here today. And to all the staff from both City and RDN. What a turnout. We feel quite privileged. This committee does not meet often, and I see today as a really good opportunity to hear some reports, ask some questions, and just learn why this committee exists and what its mandate is. And I don't see any decision points, but I see a lot of good learning information. So we'll move right into the presentations. And first of all, an overview of the service agreement between Nanaimo and the surrounding districts, which are represented on this committee. Mr. Harding.
I just wanted to, Chair, if you wanted to do this to the terms of reference of the committee first, if there's any questions on that.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, terms of reference. That was included in the package, and I don't know if...
For those who knew, if there's any questions on the history of this, is actually, our agreement goes back many, many years. It even goes back, really back to the mid-70s when the regional district, at the time, built Ben Park facilities, and then when the city brought it over in the late 80s, early 90s, this was established, and the membership was on our Parks, Recreation, and Culture Commission, and Mayor Swain was actually one of our last members on that group, I think.
So privileged.
Yeah, you were. So, if there's any questions on the terms of, and then so when the commission was dissolved, it was established to let's develop a committee like this, so that the contributing areas could still meet when required to ask and go through any questions you need.
So I realize this is new to at least a couple of directors here, so at any point today if you have questions or you want clarification, please don't hesitate to ask. Anything on the terms of reference we need to go over? So as I think everybody realizes, represented here along with the City of Nanaimo is Lanceville, as well as electoral areas A, B, and C as members of this committee. So we'll, sorry.
The only question I have is
Correct.
that the terms of reference talk about meeting twice a year and trying to meet before November, I think, 30th. Are we going to be going forward trying to meet twice a year? Is that the intention?
Well, the meeting schedule, I'll start and then let Mr. Harding answer. The meeting schedule has been really disrupted because of COVID, and that's thrown everything into a bit of uncertainty, but I would like to see us meet more regularly moving forward. So Mr. Harding, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so again, the intention was to meet more regularly, but at least 2 times a year. We have a number of things we'd like to come back and update the committee on. I think particularly, for example, the South End Community Center, as we're going through the feasibility of that, would be something really nice to have a meeting just on that to present where we're at as an example of some of the development we're working on, as well as some of the sports field things that we're also working on. So there's some amenities that we're doing that would may interest the committee that we come back and do it with more time on. But again, at least 2 times to talk would be great. And initially we're thinking just before our budget is passed, and then in the fall, as we're developing our budget, if there's any questions from the electoral areas on PRC operating budgets.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that makes sense, and we would tentatively look for our next meeting sometime in the fall, possibly November. There's a lot of exciting things going to be happening in terms of recreation in our facilities, and we definitely want to be up to date on that. All right, anything else, or can we move on to our overview? So that's item 4B on the agenda, and again, Mr. Harding.
So actually we're going to tag team here with Mr. Osborne. He's actually been doing a lot of detailed work on this as we're going through the review. So I think also the board received a report the other day on the survey results. So let's turn over to Mr. Osborne and some general aspects of the agreement.
Are we ever going to be looking this way, or should we all just go over there?
I think we're all.
It'll probably be the Tom and I and Laura show. So
Something I said.
Yeah.
No, they're just trying
I
to
just
get
don't
down
want to
from
get really
me.
sorted out by the end of this
Don't
meeting.
leave me, Laura.
No, I can't. It's hard for me to be here. And I already made Aaron leave the chair.
Before Mr. Osborne starts, I'll just say, as I mentioned, this has been a long-standing, very good working agreement for a number of years that I think has served all the communities well in providing equal access to all our facilities in the city of Nanaimo, to the electoral areas in the district. That's one I use in this example. I speak actually at lots of places, even in the States, and I use this as an example of a very good model of how to provide services within a region in an equitable way. Whoops, sorry.
Mr. Osborne, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, through the chair to the committee, and thank you for being here today. Bit of a reset for everyone in attendance, except for maybe city staff in regards to the content, because we did just present a report on Tuesday in regards to this agreement and other agreements in the regional district. Again, just for context, this is one of 2 fairly significant agreements that we do have in place in the south. It is with the representatives here today for the operation of sports fields and recreation centers. And we do have a parallel agreement in the north with the town of Qualicum Beach and the city of Parks for sports fields. Again, with the RDN being a provider of recreation up there in a pretty significant way, it is focused on that. And again, the genesis of these agreements really come down to ensuring that there is equity across the region in the services being provided. So, and those are funding into it. So when the agreement was set, it was determined that the essence of recreation centers were fundamentally being provided by the city of Nanaimo. And there is sports fields as well that are primarily in the city of Nanaimo, but it does reference some other fields in the RDN as well too. In the north, the parallel agreement up there, the sports fields are primarily in the town of Qualicum Beach, the city of Parks, and so forth. So how the agreement works is there's facilities identified in the agreement, and this is done almost 20 years ago, so you kind of have to put a timestamp on this now. And those were facilities that were identified that are being used across the region in a, I'll call it, sub-regional way, getting access to them, and those sports fields, and they're named in the agreement. The agreement also speaks to, and I'll segue into the survey we just presented to the board on Tuesday as well, that a survey is to be done every 5 years to gauge who is using the facilities at the sports fields and recreation centers. They started in well, they actually started before, but the last round of surveys are 2010, 2015, and the most recent one in 2023, and that's what we're using right now. We were to do it in 2020, pandemic happened, so it was not a really good time to be, it would have been a really easy count in 2020 to survey your rec facilities in the region. But people are back in there. Unfortunately, it's a bit more complex because people are back in the building and away we go. So with that, this agreement is in place until December 31st, 2025. And the intent now is with the survey findings being presented to the board, that then affects the requisitions for all the participants, and I'll move into that zone as well too. Generally how it works is every jurisdiction is responsible for their capital projects within their area, be it a sports field or, in the case of here, a sports field or a rec center. Those facilities are identified in the agreement. The operational costs are then combined into one pot, if you will. We then take the survey findings and then allocate it based on usage. And that's the key to the usage of the survey that we undertake as well too. So therefore, if a segment of your population is using the sports fields, you will pay a proportion of that in the operational costs of the sports fields, and the same goes for the recreation centers. That's where the team on the right, Tiffany Moore and Laura, they come into play. Richard and I move away, and they meet probably more regular than we do, because operational costs are brought forward every year, then put into essentially prior year's actuals are pulled together, and then they're brought forward to the following year to then for the tax collection. So that's generally how that works in an oversimplistic way. So going forward into the agreement itself, we'll start meeting at a staff level to reset this agreement to then bring forward to the respective councils and the board. And again, I'm speaking at a regional level because this also in the north includes Kalispell, meets the city of Parksville. In the context of here, it meets the city of Nanaimo. For some housekeeping items, also talking about what's working, what's not working, and some language in here that we might bump into that's not awesome. Is 2020-ish. 2010 language, and also to really update some of the names as well that's in the agreement. So there's been some name changes in fields and so forth. And then there will possibly, and Richard will talk about this further on in this meeting, is what other facilities are being added on to the agreement that could form the agreement. So with that, this segment of the agenda is just the agreement as a whole. It has expired in December 25th, December 31st, 2025. Staff will start meeting this year and into next year, because we want to have that agreement in place before the expiration of this one, and bring that forward to the board. And then I can talk about the survey, if there's any questions about the agreement itself.
Thanks, Mr. Osborne. Any questions at this point?
I mean, this is more about when you get to talking about the agreement, but all of the areas have developed quite a bit since 2010. And so I know Area A is doing some things with the community hall. Area B, we're going through a Parks and Rec master plan, and we provide recreation on the island. Certainly not like a pool or arena or anything of that scale, but we do a fair amount of programming, and I assume Lansfield does as well. So just looking forward about, I know a lot of this was determined based on how people were using things in 2010. How will this survey go towards, and maybe you can tell me just to wait and hold off on this question, because it's more about the next review, so that might be later on in the agenda, now that I'm talking.
Well, it's a great question. If we can deal with it now, we might as well.
Sure. Yeah, through the chair to Director Crane. This is actually a good time to bring these issues forward, because staff can start assembling sort of the issues and the change as well. So I'll even point out when the agreement was done, we weren't providing recreation services in Area A as well. So that might be something that we have to bring in and survey as well the next go around to identify how the surveys right now are called, I'll say, Nanaimo-centric. It's determining who's coming to Nanaimo to share the operational costs. We may have to look back at, okay, who may be using Gabriola Rec Services or Area A Rec Services as that goes forward, and do a bit of test on that. And then that would then identify the sharing of those type of costs. I always stick to, I don't want to use the inappropriate language of but that has been used for in the past, but use or abuse in regards to, I don't want to be, you want to ensure that the facilities that are being funded are not being offered elsewhere in the region. So over the multiple years of working with municipalities, they'll often say, well, why not tennis courts? Well, tennis courts are being provided equally at a very broad level. There's no one place where you have a tennis court and not tennis court, for example. But rec centers and pools and arenas are vastly different. So you know that there's people coming from it. It's not likely being provided in here. As we move into the recreation centers, there'll be a fascinating conversation as we go forward. And I use Oliver Woods that we tested again, because the agreement speaks to the 10% threshold. How many people are coming from an outlying area to use that facility, and it has to meet the 10% threshold. And the words in there is public use as well, not rental. So going in at a casual level as opposed to a wedding or other type of uses that might be in a rec center type of thing. So that's the stuff that we'll work through with staff, run through the various scenarios to sort of see, is it working? Is it current in today's world as well too, as opposed to when this agreement was struck, and try to update that. So it's certainly we'll note that at some point needs to be answered for clarification moving forward.
Thanks, Mr. Osborne. Mr. Harding.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and maybe it's already been self-evident, there's a lot of things that this agreement, you don't contribute to this agreement. So that's why the finance people spend more time on it than us. So for example, it doesn't include any cultural expenditures. So there's no cost into the museum, the Port Theatre, any of our cultural grants or programs. None of that is included, as well as our parks and trails system. Extensively, that's not part of this at all either. So which gets back to the tennis courts, some of even our sports courts, which aren't included in the financial aspect. It's really specifically those list of items that we see that being a more regional use to it.
Yes.
So the question I have is just, and it's happy to pay towards the pool and the arenas and all these amazing sports fields you're putting in, and I'm not gonna even try and pretend that Gabrielans aren't over there enjoying all of those facilities. But you know, when I look at Bevan, and it has the gym and that type of programming, I'm assuming we're paying operational costs, not just for the pool at Bevan and the fields at Bevan, but also for that kind of community center aspect of Bevan, but I'm not 100% sure, and that's kind of where I'm wondering a little bit more about programming.
Right.
And because I don't see that quite as the same thing, but.
Yeah, so Bevan would specifically would still include the social center, because if you go back to, here's my historian, if you go back to mid-70s, that was built by the region, and so it's all part of an extra. So when we took back over the operations, that all came back in, and that's kind of how this was grown out of. This agreement was grown out of us taking back what was a regional facility. So it was all included as a regional function. It was a regional referendum in the mid-70s and operated by the region until early 90s, very early 90s, like 1989, we switched over. So if that helps with that, but that's I think what Mr. Osborne is saying is, as we go in, if the other areas are starting to do more community center type things, where do we talk about some of those shared expenses with it?
Thanks.
Yes, a lot of people don't realize that Bevan Park was originally in the regional district. So this, and I know we're going to talk about future facilities, but this is going to be the crux of the staff meetings between now and next fall, Mr. Osborne, Mr. Harding, and so at that point, hopefully you'll be able to come to this committee with an updated list of facilities and places that we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I also think that's one of the aspects of this group is to meet and talk together also how that would work. So we would come with you on key steps and say, what do you think about this or that, or what can we work on? So again, the real purpose of this group is to help us work through those.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you. Are we ready to move into the financial element of this, or do you have anything else, Mr. Osborne?
I think just under, I could segue into section C, and that's the actual survey that was presented to the board. And then there's a staff report that talks about the financial part of that. So there's some really good information in both the staff cover report as well as what I call the ERC strategies report, which is actually the survey data itself and where does it come from. And if you sort of want to look at trends and sort of where is your area trending, both reports speak well to it. As there's multiple jurisdictions in here, I won't focus in on one area, but if you do look at the staff report on table 1, you can sort of see the last 3 survey cycles, and that's on page 3 of my agenda that I have here. And you can sort of drill in on your own individual area, but to see how are the people using the pools, the arenas, and the sports fields. And then we also provide analysis against census of the 2021, so you can see Nayu City and Nanaimo across the board, census population of making up of the southern part of the region about 83.9%. And interestingly enough, sports fields are 89.3%. So there's a pretty close correlation between the census versus the use. And it may dip or raise depending on where you're at. Obviously, people are more aquatic based in Nanaimo in 2023 than their population base, so people are using pools more than your fields if you sort of want to look at it. So it's kind of fun to use that data in different ways going forward, and you can kind of see how that's trending out. And it's important to note we do, when we move to the financial aspect, which is the top of it, it's raised up at the earning board table a fair amount, is we do take the average of the last 3 survey cycles. And that was based off the very early agreements with the city of Nanaimo that looked only at 1 year. And then the next survey cycle came and it caused spikes. And some were fairly significant. And as I noted just on Tuesday, the smaller ones feel the spikes the biggest because 3.9 and 4.5 can be quite big to a smaller population base or a funding area. So that's the reason why the agreement itself says there's 3 survey cycles done and they're averaged to sort of help smooth it out over that period of time. As far as the surveys go versus the finance, it's also important to note we show in the survey data where everyone is coming to those facilities. And so I'll use City of Nanaimo Arena. We'll show where everyone's coming across the region or others to that. Not everyone pays into that, so you're going to see a different number. We have to extrapolate the outliers and move it to district participants who are actually paying for that. So you'll tend to see different data sets in the staff report and the survey document. Hopefully it walks it through you fairly clear, but also a topic of conversation that people ask about in this setting here. So with that, I won't break apart the survey. I know the board has seen it on Tuesday, but happy to answer any more questions that you may have.
Yes, Director Stanley, I think was first. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So through the chair of staff, it's not necessarily a question, but maybe a point of future consideration, which is if we're looking at the province's efforts on housing and density direction, I think we're going to see significant trends of increases in the population centers and less so in the smaller areas. And so that might affect that I know 3-year trend is confusing, but you know what I mean, like the data points. And so just throwing that for consideration, if we start to see really significant changes in that way, that 3-year trend might actually not reflect, that average number might not reflect like current uses in a way that is meaningful. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there. If we see significant changes with regards to the density piece, that might throw that kind of pattern out of whack.
Yeah, it gets a bit confusing on 3-year trends versus 3 survey cycles.
Yeah, that's
so 3 survey cycles is over a 15-year period. So you can start to see that a little bit. It's maybe not even so much about density, it can be affordability. And if you go into the data set, not so noticeable as much. I'm sort of looking at, but some of them is full actually in area C, you'll see an increase in usage. And that speaks to maybe where the people are using and increasing use of the city facilities based on where they're living. So I'm not gonna correlate 100% over, but you can kind of start to see that happening. We're seeing that in Area C. In the north, we're seeing it in Area F as well too. You're seeing the more affordable part of the Oceanside area being a higher user of the facilities. And I would extrapolate that's families for the most part, and the higher density housing in that area, so you have more hits, if you will, from that area. So that's where you can really dive into the survey data and start sort of surmising and pulling that together. So density is one thing, but it's also affordability of where people are using it as well too. I think you're seeing a bit of a bounce back from COVID as well. People are resetting still to this day, so Gabriel was lower than they have been in the past. Lanceville's sort of in the middle there. But there is a full reset of behavior patterns that are happening as well too. So I'll be really curious if the go 5 years from now, 2028 survey, what that looks like and sort of how people are using those facilities. So.
Director Hammonds, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry if I'm not interpreting this correctly. The 10% threshold that we use to discount all of our woods, we don't meet 10% across some of the other areas. So how do we reconcile that?
Yeah. Great question.
I'm not misreading that.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you're not. No, so at the time of forming the agreement, a line had to be drawn in the sand on what is in the agreement and what's not in the agreement. So I say the facilities that are identified were based on agreement. And so when the agreement was formed, say, yes, we have a field here, there's a recreation center here, these will be added. And it looked to even Rollo on Gabriel and Extension. And Extension at the time was more active field at that time period. It's not right now. So it'll be interesting. Yeah. So I know Director Nelson's working hard to reinvigorate that part as well. I call those facilities agreement-based. It's like you're in negotiation, and these are the agreements that we want in the agreement, and this is what we're going to agree to. The rest was forward thinking, saying, okay, what's our threshold? And maybe it's the wrong threshold, you know, that it should be at 10%, and should it be lower, or do we just write that into the agreement? So again, you can have agreement facilities written in, so when you redo this again, and then you have the ones of those facilities that weren't being envisioned at that time. So probably talking about the South End Community Center, even South Wellington Community Center being for, you know, what do we do with those? So back to your question, no, you're not wrong, but those were by way of agreement. In other words, negotiations. So there was a group of staff in a room, and there was a group of politicians at the time saying, we're going to sign on to this, this is what needs to be in it, and so forth, and then how do we move forward with that?
Great question.
And then this is, you shared to Council Hammonds, it's another example of how much now is densified for those years, right? So like, we're growing by a small community every year. So those numbers are going to, and this was done back in the 90s initially. We were like 45,000, 50,000. Now we're over 100. I'd say we're close to 110,000. People say 104, but we're growing that much. Those kind of, as we go into the new agreement, I think those kind of use aspects will have to be reviewed.
Director Watson, do you have a question?
No.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes.
Just for the usage and following up the use of community center, the usage was just for pools or aquatic. It didn't look at any programming.
Correct. Yeah, and through the chair, as the consultant said on Tuesday, a way of collecting data is really vastly improved as well too. We've always had registration systems in place, so you can actually get a pretty easy data set in regards to who is in a program and where they're coming from, and extrapolate that out. You don't, it's almost, as well as the drop-in data is even better as well with the membership modules that are coming forth, so that's even stronger. So to actually undertake identifying where people are coming from and using a facility for a program is actually relatively not that complex. I don't want to oversimplify for the city and non-staff and ourselves in the north, but you'd be basically using your registration system software, pulling out the data set of your users, and then identifying where they're coming from. So you can identify if you're going to the Veteran Social Center and you're in a class of some form or a program of some form, we can identify that relatively easy. So going forward, that's something we can consider going down.
On ours too, registration with the new Perfect Mind, or what's X, Program X, now whatever it's called. It's really good. Where we found a little bit of struggle in this time, because there was a bit of a gap, is getting our registration information for all our sports groups. So that, because now they're not taking always addresses, they're taking just email addresses. And so it was harder for some of us to get some of the larger groups, everyone's actual location. And that's really one of the things that shows, I think, a lot of the contributions of where all the hockey players are coming from, soccer players, it's baseball and such. So that's a real component to what makes up the sports world. It's where they're all coming from.
And I think that question, if I may, goes to what I was going to ask, and that is, it seems to me that the gathering of the information would be really challenging. I'm hearing we have systems in place that make it quite efficient and hopefully quite statistically valid. So I'm seeing nods.
Yeah, and certainly on the program side, and so again, the consultant on Tuesday said we didn't have to do as many, well, we did intercept surveys, but you can marry that up with membership coming across. So membership is like 100%, you're coming across, you're swiping your card, we know who you are. Intercept is a time-based intercept, and pulling that together, it just improves time and time again. So the drop in data was easier this time. As Mr. Harding was mentioning, the team data, kudos to the City of Nanaimo team and the RDN team to gather that information. More challenging, but still, once collected, it's 100% because these are the teams using the facilities. So.
Mr. Harding.
Another one that's been for tracking too is we have a thing called LEAP program, which is an economic access program, which all the contributing areas can participate in. So we have a lot of people with economic challenges that we can track that easier too because of, and then I was actually using it as one of my updates in some of our programs with our Accessibility and Inclusiveness Committee. Did a major update on that to make it less barriers to access for that. But those are also kind of things we can share with a group of where people are coming from, particularly those with some more financial constraints.
I guess the other thing I would comment on is that I think this process has made it much more efficient and easier for staff to deal with registrations. And I'm thinking back, I guess, going to the 80s when there was a period of time when teams registered, staff had to identify, as you were saying, Mr. Harding and Mr. Osborne, addresses. So if one player from Nanaimo would pay a set amount of registration, his teammate who happened to live in Lanceville or on Gabriola would be charged an extra amount because they weren't within the city limits. Real headache for staff and her attendance, and this avoids all that.
Yeah, that's always a risk if we don't have this, is that it creates those two-tier challenges.
Great, thank you. Director Swain.
Yes, through the chair. My question has to do more with, the operational fees that we're paying into this. I'm really curious about, what input we can have in relation to the conditions of facilities and fields and so on. Just as a bit of a background, my kids are actively involved in hockey and baseball, so we're frequent flyers of the facilities in Nanaimo. But you can't help notice, and I'm not at all being critical here, but I'm wondering if there's challenges in the funding around the operational upkeep of some of these facilities and properties or fields and so forth. So maybe the question is really, are we currently underfunded? Because when I go into certain facilities, I'm noticing things aren't being upkept. So, and again, this isn't to be critical, but if we need to all contribute more to make sure the facilities are kept to a certain standard, how can we have that conversation?
Well, I think that's an interesting one. You were the chair to Mayor Swain. When we do meet, if you have some of those specifics and lists of some concerns, or even if your constituents are given the concerns, you can come through this or just come directly to me on what those are. We like to think we're pretty responsive to any kind of complaints. Funding, would you want more funding? We always want more funding.
Yeah, we'll take a minute. I thought I heard you offering more.
Yeah, wait a minute.
And so, yeah, they are expensive to keep up. There's no question. We feel like we're doing that under our asset management plan. We're trying to get better at our asset and our preventative maintenance schemes. Some of our buildings are getting older, but like Frank Crane is getting older, but the bones are still there to keep it. We think keep it going. It may not be as shiny as a new one. Cliff is also getting older, but we did a number of things to it. The ice center seems to keep going pretty good if it's hockey that you're thinking of. But it definitely, when we talk about some things, if there are some specifics that your constituents or yourself see that we need to pay some attention to, we're always open to it.
And just if I may, as a follow-up, so what I'm wondering also is, I'm sure is the city doing regular condition reports on facilities and has a good understanding of what is going on within those facilities, because I hear from a lot of people, and there seems to be a number of deficiencies. And again, I'm not trying to be critical here. Like, I'm very appreciative of what my constituents in Lanceville continues, as well as my family and so on. But I sometimes wonder when year after year, certain things or problems continue to persist. I go right to the funding piece. Are we underfunding, or we don't have enough money to address all that, concerns that maybe people have about, the conditions of the facilities and fields.
Chair, to get back to Mayor Swain, one thing if we do meet more regularly, we can actually come and do some other presentations. And one we could do is our condition assessment and our asset management plan. And we can go through how we're trying to address keeping facilities up. For example, real major one that's coming up is we've got to re-roof Frank Crane. We've stretched that roof literally because it's a fabric roof. We've stretched that roof 20 years past its initial life, but we keep testing it and keep moving it out because we can. But those big costs are coming up, and we could show some of those things. And then if there's some maintenance issues, so just need to know the list of it. If it's something that's not working, we just need to know. Usually we get a list as Mayor, Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Hemmons will know. They get lots of emails of everything from the temperature of the pool to the amount of Christmas lights or not Christmas lights. So, holiday lights. But yeah, so definitely, because if you once more Chair, if you remember as in the commission, one of the nice things about having a commission is that we would bring in, and the commission members could chair. We don't have that now. That was a nice thing about the commission, and groups and organizations would come in and speak to the commission and talk about their ideas or their concerns. So within in isolation of that, we depend more on direct communication from groups and organizations and individuals, but could also utilize this group at times for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks. I really take your points, Mayor Swain, and I know you're not being critical, but certainly if there are specific deficiencies that you notice, please feel free to let me know or let Mr. Harding know. Beyond that, the Nanaimo Council does get regular updates on the state of our facilities and maintenance plans for them. This is reminding me of the old Recreation Commission, which I still miss and I think had a valuable place, but hopefully we can do some of the work that commission used to do in terms of communication at least. Good, anything else?
Just following up on that, because we're talking about capital and operations, and this is an operations agreement.
Yes.
Is there, I don't know, I think sometimes it can be difficult sometimes to see where the line is between operation, maintenance, and capital. I don't know if you can provide a little bit more information.
Well, it's actually our next speaker who's the expert on this, because I get my fingers either smacked or really smacked, depending on what I use capital and operating for. But part of the agreement is, well, actually, I'm not even gonna try to, you'll do much better, of which we can and can't do.
Ms. Mercer, you're going to take over and talk about operating budgets.
Yeah, so we have, I think, I believe in the agenda, there is the 2023 financials, which base the 2024 contributions from each area. But to answer your question about capital and operating, we have a capital asset policy that determines what falls into operating and what falls as capital, and there's thresholds for each different type of asset. So those are really the deciding points. You guys want to add anything else to that? So yeah, so we have a policy that says if it's this dollar value and up, it's capital. If it's under that value, it's considered operating. That's really the.
It benefits you guys more than us.
Yes.
Yeah, it benefits.
Do you know what the threshold is?
It is through the chair. It is different for each asset type.
Oh, okay.
Mayor Swain.
Yeah, this is gonna, through the chairs, it's gonna follow on that same line of questioning. So if it's with one of the ice centers, would the Zamboni fall within that as an operational cost, or would that be viewed as more of a capital cost? Just, I'm trying to get an understanding of the threshold, the dollar value.
They'll have both associated with it, depending if it's just, most more electric now, sorry, Chair,
No.
most more electric, so if it's electrical maintenance thing that we can fix under operating, it's not hit that threshold. But if it's the actual asset, we're buying a new Zamboni, it's capital and it's depreciated.
Through the chairs, along the same lines, if we go a little bit down in value to maybe the AV systems or the audio systems in the arenas, is that the same? Like, would that fall within the operating, or is that more of a capital item? Because that's one of the issues.
Yes, well, this is why it was great if you had the commission, sorry, Chair. So that's actually a combination of our Clipper agreement and what we're doing. So Clippers are responsible and own certain aspects, and now, so like for example, the middle score, we're gonna get into some details here. Scoreboard in the center ice is owned by the Clippers. And we actually had in our budget this year to update, go in with council, but we had some capital shortcomings, so we had to move some things out. We were gonna try and redo that under our own and not have it with the Clippers. Because it is, that center clock is faulty and it's past its age. But it's kind of this, so we also give the Clippers all the revenue for advertising, so they're supposed to be using that advertising revenue to kind of keep some of those other things up running. That's more of a negotiation issue there, but no, when the general user though just sees that's looking old and should be new, if that helps a little bit. So we have a strategy with it, it's just where do we come out to get that in, but we know we need a new audiovisual there, Frank Krieger.
So if I may, on a very simplified level, would it be fair to say that generally repair is operational and replace is capital?
I'd say generally, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor Swain, go ahead.
Yeah, through chairs, just to follow, and that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, I know sometimes with operational it can include, replacing up to a certain threshold. So that's, it's when that, they have to, there must be a number, I'm sure, for a lot of this stuff in terms of where it does, there's that, it crosses the threshold for, it is definitely a capital purchase versus just, a regular, replacing chairs, stuff like that.
So, through the chair, there is a section in the definitions of the agreement that talks to non-shareable costs. So it says, generally mean the development of a new sports field or recreation facility and or an upgrade to an existing sports field or recreation facility costing more than $10,000, including but not limited to the construction of facilities or improvements or the addition, replacement, repair, or extension of fences, roofs, seating, irrigation systems, wells, drainage, lighting, backstops, goal posts, time clocks, or similar game display signage or sod replacement. So there is a limit on what the agreement covers. So anything of those, if they were considered operating, there is a max on them.
Where is that in the agreement?
It is definition, it's section 1.1. I think it's on the second page of the agreements.
Page 4 in mine.
Hold up.
Yes, Director Melanson.
Through the chair, I'm just curious, as part of updating our agreement, I assume some of these thresholds are fairly dated. Are we looking at updating any of them to more accurate modern numbers? We all know the cost of everything has gone up.
Through the chair, that would be my recommendation to look at, if we're gonna look at the agreement, to look at everything. Thank you.
Quite right. Directors, councilors, any other comment or question? Ms. Mercer, anything else to that?
Not on the agreement, no. Just in the, I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has with the numbers in the financial reports. For, like I say, 2023, actual costs base those are what the 2024 agreement to the city is based on from each area. Facilities, the total facility cost, shareable costs were just over $9.7 million for 2023, and sports fields were just over 2.4 million. As Mr. Harding has already said, this is not all of the cost, it's only a select number of cost centers that we consider shareable. And I believe, go through, that there's a bit of there's a summary and then there's a breakdown of kind of the breakdown, probably more detail than anybody needs, but of just this areas that we consider for inclusion. So it's broken down between arenas at Bevan in the Nanaimo Ice Center, community centers, that includes Bowen and Bevan, and the pools at Bevan and the Nanaimo Aquatic Center and Bowen. And then of course we have the sports fields costs. So we'll try to answer, if anybody has any questions on those costs, we'll try to answer those.
Chair, just to add to that, just in perspective, so overall PRC net or our gross expenditures is close to 30 million, I think, for 2024. So that's why those are just the shareable costs, so there's lots of other costs. And that doesn't include our capital. That doesn't also include our revenue, but it's, we're pushing 30 right now.
Yeah, it's, all of Parks Rec and Culture is of $28.9 million.
And what always impresses me is how close we come when we compare the actuals and the budgeted.
I was
numbers.
impressed with that.
Yes, it's a real tribute to our staff. Some would call it basic accounting. I would never.
Some years are better than others, for sure.
A lot of work goes into trying to get those numbers as close
That's
as
very
possible.
impressive. Yes, Director Stanley.
Just a simple question, perhaps I missed it, but the color coding, do we know what that yellows and the greens?
Yes, I believe that the colored ones are, they're shared costs between the, it's maintenance and ground costs that are shared between the different areas. So that's the yellow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Facilities.
Yeah, for the facilities. And then the green is, I believe, are those inputs?
It just looks pretty.
Key numbers versus the white cells or calculations.
Yeah, I think those are keyed in numbers is the green. And then the yellow is, those are calculated fields based on some shared costing. If you look at any of the finance kind of spreadsheets,
The
they're full
white
color.
is calculated costs.
What's that?
The weight is calculated cost?
Those are sums, usually those are sums or calculated. I don't have the spreadsheet open. Yeah, so there is an input sheet and they all get pulled into the following spreadsheets. And I believe that the green are we either input the cell or it's getting pulled in from another spreadsheet. So it doesn't mean anything to any of the calculation per se. It's just a way for us to know where the numbers are coming from. Thanks.
Anything else on the numbers? All right, Ms. Mercer, thank you very much. And does that bring us to section E, Mr. Harding?
Yes.
I've been looking forward to.
Oh, well, it's a first one, and it is one that I hope that if there's some specific projects the community would like us to come back and do a more broader presentation on, of course, we'd be pleased to, because there are exciting projects. A lot of the projects I won't talk about because, again, they're not part of the agreements. Everything we're doing in Westwood or Maffeo or Loudon or West Neck Point and such aren't part of it. But I wanted to start with one, and it probably sounds like it's not related, but the previous council and this council supported it, is the creation of an Accessibility and Inclusiveness Committee that was started last term. And it's been a very, very positive committee. PRC leads it, but every department in the city is part of it. And it's been a very robust group. And we do actually get quite a bit of questions in from either Gibrola or Cedar or Extension, maybe even Lanceville, into questions from the people asking about accessibility and inclusive issues. And I just wanted to mention that to you because Tom and I have also talked about it, and also with Mr. Holmes, is everyone has to be legislated. Haven't we had it before? You needed legislation, but have it. I just want to make sure that the area directors and the mayor know that we have that committee. And if constituents have issues of anything to do with accessibility and inclusiveness in any of our facilities, that group meets every 2 months. It can also meet, like this one can meet other times. But it's a good group to bring any kind of issues that people may have in regards to how we're programming things and how accessible our facilities are or inaccessible. And there's some interesting information out there. For example, the committee just did a priority of which of our public facilities should be accessed this year. We did a whole bunch last year, and then upgrades to those facilities based on those assessments. And one of the ones that the committee had mentioned already is our LEAP program. So last term, the committee spent a lot of time totally reviewing our LEAP program. That's an economic access program, and how to reduce those barriers to accessibility. And I'm really proud of all the work that group did on it. I think we're still rolling it out, but it's another one. If you don't know about it and some of your constituents don't know that even it's available, make sure you grab some of our program information and hand it out, because it is a way for those in need or those who just can't make it have access to not just facilities but to our programs as well. And we've expanded it now to a little bit with some of our cultural groups have now taken it on. Even though you can have free access at the museum and art gallery and such, it's always nice to have a card to say, here's a card we can come in with, and so you don't feel that you need to put a donation in or whatever. So it's finding ways to make lower the barriers to access our facilities. So I don't know if there's any questions on that. Just want to make sure you're aware of that group. Thank you. So in regards to new things, and here's again where the agreement actually benefits you. So every time we build an artificial turf field, it actually lowers your operating costs, because artificial turf fields are very capital intensive. So for example, the 2 new turf fields that we're doing at Harrods and Tenniel, close to 10 million, very close to 10 million, not going to be over 10 million, just very close to 10 million. That'll actually reduce the operating, because then we won't have to cut the grass, fertilize the grass, water the grass. All those costs are down. And same with the 2 artificials at Bevan. And then Quinnistook Field, which is one we did in partnership with the school. Again, it's the cost to that will be eventually when we change the carpet. So that is something that if we are negotiating a new agreement, we may want to look at something like, okay, if these facilities are used by the region heavily, maybe we work in some type of aspect when the carpet needs to be replaced, or there's some aspect to that that's included in the agreement because the operating has gone way down. And then also now LED lights, so no more metal halides, or electrical costs are down, watering costs are just zero, or should be zero, except for the water fountains. And no fertilizer, no cutting. We still have to do some maintenance with staff to keep them groomed, and weekly we go through and take a metal detector across it all and fluff up the crumb rubber, and we top up the crumb rubber, but really the operating costs are down. And then because they're more used, our revenues are actually increased with artificial turfs also. So those, the two of course, we've had Bevan, Quinnistook, we've added since the last agreement.
More, I think. Yes, definitely.
And then now the two at Harewood are already been in our agreement, but now we've converted them from natural turf fields to artificial turf fields. There will be a lot of opening in April, which we're excited about. And then also addition is we've created what we call now the Stadium District, which you may hear about. And that's for years and years we tried to work with the school board how to deal with Rotary Bowl and Sroxman. We came to agreement in 2016, 17, 18, 17, where we purchased Rotary Bowl and Sroxman Stadium, the parking lot, and another little piece of property from the school board. And then from the proceeds that we went to buy the land, they turned around and went into partnership to build Quinnistook's stadium field. And then we've done a lot of upgrades to Rotary Bowl, probably $4 million upgrades to Sroxman Stadium, count it all, maybe more. And now working on, if you've been there, trying to create a stadium district where major sporting events can come and utilize. So for example, this year we're doing the BC track and field, and then also the BC regular track and field. The BC High School track and field is going to be there. We're this close to getting the nationals for '94, very close. And we think we'll be very, very close to getting it next year. Night Owls, of course, have come in. Soccer now has two semi-pro teams in the spring. Raiders have moved over there, so it's become a central kind of sports area, the stadium area that we wanted to achieve. And I mentioned that because with a lot more major games going on there, it's one of the reasons why we did the artificial turfs at Harewood, because there's still a lot of demand for practices and such. So Harewood was converted really to help make the stadium district work. Plus, at a city our size, region our size, we need at least 4, 5, possibly 6 turf fields to keep what's going. So if you don't like turf fields, you should like the fact that it's operationally you're paying less and your constituents are getting a lot more use of it.
Director Stanley, sorry, Mr. Harden, did you have a question?
I do, just so I understand with Quinnistook, it's interesting because of the cost sharing arrangement with the school district. I'm wondering how, if that's part of our fields agreement, and then if so, how do we figure out usage? And I'm thinking, you know, of the students that are using it, and frankly, my kids are at ND, so, you know, I know that ND is you know, across the region students, so I'm wondering how, if it's in the agreement, and how do we factor out usage on that?
Yeah, Chair. The school gets use up until about 5 o'clock at night, 5:30, then it's community use after that. So, and usually our sports fields Monday to Friday aren't getting much use until after 3 or 4 o'clock anyway, so there's no point. But because it's very, again, capital intensive, we're actually making a little bit more on the revenue side of that to offset the operating. But we also have a separate agreement on the capital with the school board, so every year we contribute 25, I think I may have increased that to 50, 25 to 50,000 each to go into capital for replacement and upgrade of the field, and or if there's any surplus revenue, we go into that. But it's a good question on how this works. Right now it's not listed as one of our fields, or is it?
That's what I'm just checking.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, no, it was, yeah, through the chair, again, when this agreement was done, it was actually a school district facility, so it wasn't captured in that going on. The question to Director Stanley's question about usage, that's where the field usage stats comes in, and as you well know, you just don't use one field, you're gonna be moving across different fields, so the normal, be it a softball or a soccer association, you're not just only using one field, your association is using multiple fields. So we're collecting the data of field uses in general, who's using the fields. We don't go field by field by field by field, it's just then extrapolating on that kind of thing. But that will be one item that will be added in relatively easy in my mind, to this agreement, because it's regionally being used by associations and individuals as well.
Just I ask because if the school usage is really heavy usage, I'm wondering how that is considered.
So what, first part
If
of
the
that again?
school usage is heavy usage, how would that be considered?
Chair, I think it's a good question. It's probably one when we get into the details on that one, it would be, and again, it would only be though about an hour and a half a day that wouldn't be available to the public that most of our fields would be. Because again, after 6 o'clock, they get 6 o'clock, 5:30 to 6, it's all public use, and the weekends, holidays, the school board only gets it for those school hours, and even pro day days, they turn it back to us for other kind of use. But it's because it's unique, maybe it'd be one that we just have to look at as a group uniquely, how do we want to do something? Because we want to encourage more of those agreements. The school board's also contributed a little bit to the turf fields at Harewood, and we're going to have another agreement with them, they can have daytime use. But less in the evening because we've got two, they don't need two, and they also didn't contribute as much. But to help that Barsby program, football, and such, they're also looking to move all the field lacrosse as much as we can into those two fields. So lacrosse can have a real major center there with the covered space, the other box, and then the two field lacrosse areas.
Not at all critical, I think it's great, I'm just wondering how it's gonna be practical, but I think I'm really happy that we're doing that, so not at all critical.
Maybe if I could just clarify that, probably look at this, Mercer. So in the agreement, it talks about sports fields, and I think that I'll call those the Mariner fields, for lack of a better word, or.
Those are,
Yeah, those are the ones, so.
Yeah.
So that's what was, when you see Roxman, that's the Mariner fields, because this Roxman was privately being used and so forth.
Yeah, so those are two, Chair, if I could, those are two that are add-ons. So the two that will add on, including Quinnistock, will be, we haven't added Rotary Bowl on track and field because we didn't have a track and field facility before, because that's now all ours. And then the big Roxman Stadium, which is not the Roxman Fields, we have too many Rotary and Roxman names, but the Roxman Stadium is now added to our inventory, and definitely there's regional use of that.
So just if I may come back to Director Stanley's question, for the Q field, is that a joint operating agreement, Mr. Harding, between us and the school district?
It is.
So for the purposes of this committee and this agreement, we would be only concerned with the evening usage, not the daytime school usage?
Yes, but I think Council Stanley has a good point. How do we have a tri-party agreement kind of on sports, how do we deal with that? And it'll probably be more later on when we get into renewal. Although we're still adding, like for example, Council's provided 3 million through some grants, but also capital to add seating and a media box just for Quinnistock to help. Again, we're slowly moving on the stadium district improvements, and it'll be years until we get totally where we want to be. But every year we're adding more capital to make it a central sports area.
Mr. Osborne.
Maybe oversimplifying, but we'll be moving to this world, but I would probably suggesting for that agreement would be that what is the city's contribution, and that's the shared portion. So it's not the gross cost, it's the net cost to the city, and then that's the ability to operate that field. So obviously if the school district wasn't paying a portion, it would be bigger. And so we deduct the school district portion and the city is contributing, and that's the shareable cost. We'll work the math on that, but maybe we'll see how that can play out.
Director Craig.
So, all very exciting. City of Nanaimo was doing great things, but it made me wonder when you're talking about bringing in. I'm always complimentary to the city.
They're not finished yet. That's all.
but you're talking about bringing in bigger events, and this new stadium district will allow you to bring in. And so I'm thinking, how would that be reflected in a usage survey when the cost of people from outside the contributing area is calculated and then distributed across the participating areas, but realistically, none of us are benefiting from sports events coming into the area. So I guess you just have to be careful about how you figure out the use.
Through the chair, we already are. So we look at public use. So it doesn't include like the Nanaimo Clippers, you know, that's in a sporting event or outside. People that are on those teams and so forth, so that's excluded. So again, we use who is using the fields from a public perspective use, period. Events on a field or could be duplication, but we're just trying to determine who is using these facilities. And if the city wasn't providing them, there would be no facility for these people to be on. I think that's those operational costs. You may have a festival on that field. That's not going to count, kind of thing. But the field is still there for the primary purpose of being a field for.
I wasn't sure what the other was.
Yeah,
So, sorry, Mr. Harding, just before you add on. So, for example, the semi-pro soccer teams, when they use the Q fields, that has nothing to do with this committee or assessing any costs. But that might have the effect of pushing some youth teams or local teams onto some of our other turf fields or other fields. And that would be where the calculations would have to take place.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'd say that's the case, but I'll also say that for Night Owls, the soccer, still probably 80% of the players are local kids on those teams. Night Owls, no, they're bringing in lots of different folks, but the spectators are all local spectators. They're not coming from Alberta to watch it or anything. They're local people buying the tickets to come and watch. Same as the Clippers, or others. It's one of those amenities that people are utilizing to come and watch games and sports.
But we're concerned with users of the facility, not the spectators.
Right,
Your
I was
point is
just saying
correct.
that the benefit though is the fact that
Yes.
people are utilizing, are coming using the facilities to watch.
Did somebody else have a question? Mayor Slay.
Comment and maybe a question, but through the chair. Yeah, all this really just makes my head hurt. Because it's incredibly complex and you know, I look at it as just strictly as it's the operational costs of these facilities and buildings and so on. But I think the one thing we can't lose sight of is even with youth sport and there's tournaments, that's a huge economic driver for the region. You know, we may have a hockey tournament and there's 12 teams that come to town, right? Or there might be a couple Nanaimo teams, but that might be a net of, say, 10 teams that are coming to town. You know, so there's lots of spin-off to here, and I know we're just speaking to the operational stuff, but you know, it's an incredibly complex, you know, thing you guys have to deal with, and I appreciate the work you do because it just hurts my head. So, thank you.
I agree. Mr. Harding.
Well, just to add to this, because we have a whole sports tourism strategy, which I could also,
Yeah.
we could also come and talk to the group, which does have that benefit to all the area of a spin-off of if we did the track and field nationals, for example, the spin-off to the community is huge. And we actually have a program, we plug it in, the numbers and the nights and the stays and beds, and people then will stay over. People come to Nanaimo on the island, particularly, to stay after an event. For example, next year we do the seniors games. We've got the BC Seniors Games for September 2025, and it'll have a huge, it'll be using all these facilities, and it'll have a huge spin-off economically for those who want to stay for the, you know, later on.
Mayor Slay.
Yeah, sorry, I have a follow-up through the chair. So in terms of, you know, just kind of jumped in my head, but with respect to the revenue that's generated from some of these events, because I know with Minor Hockey, for instance, they're renting the ice from the city. So with the rental fees that are collected to run these tournaments and so on, is a portion of that money then going back into the operational side of things and paying the costs, the facility costs? So that's really the question, is so that revenue collected being diverted back, not just the capital, but to the operational side of things.
Yeah, Chair, to Mayor's point, so as you notice, they do the net, so the net is all the revenue minus the expenditures. We get our net for those, so for a big terminal coming in, we'll still get a rental rate, which, but the spin-off, of course, is in the gas stations and the restaurants and all that kind of stuff. Our revenues won't necessarily go up, we don't make a lot of money off of the Raiders, for example, putting on an event, or sports, or even the soccer. They'll rent their facilities, but it's still the same rental kind of rates, if that's the question. But all that revenue goes in to offset our costs most directly. Yeah. So anything, again, I guess that would be clear. So if anything, any revenue went into, say, the aquatic center, it all goes to offset the overall operating costs, which is then used to work whatever these guys do magically, of who contributes to what. But it's
As my kids say, they'll
Yes.
mind blowing, right?
But one more thing.
yes,
So
oh,
those are some of the bigger ones that we've been working on. Is there? The other is we're just finishing up our feasibility phase on the South End Community Center, and it is one we'd really like to be able to come back at some point and do a presentation to this committee, or even to the regional board if they'd rather do that, of where we're at with the South End Community Center. And then definitely Cedar will an extension, and then we'll be interested in what we'll do, because we want to have it situated south of 10th Street. When I say South End, I'm saying south of 10th Street. We have an offer in for some property, which council's given approval for, and it definitely fits that criteria that it's south of 10th Street. And we're excited about it. We've worked hard in the last couple of years. It's one of those facilities that's long in coming. It was identified in our 2005 master plan, and now we're here and we still don't have it done. But we're excited to say it's in a true community center. So it's not just recreation, but it's going to be lots of recreational, but hopefully cultural, as well as a lot of other true community services. We're looking, for example, council has a policy that any new buildings needs to consider primary health care. And so we're working closely with different health providers of how to do primary health care, daycare, looking still at hopes of maybe a library component there, if that's possible. There's lots of other issues with that, but I still hope.
Yes.
Maybe some community policing and other aspects that we could do a presentation with. And with that, we can just some general improvements, and we could go through some of the capital improvements to some of our facilities. The Aquatic Center is going to be going through a major energy efficiency upgrade this next year from a grant that we got. Wendy, help with that, was it like $5 million we got for that one? Yeah, and that's for all energy efficiency upgrades for the Aquatic Center. Pools are very expensive, that's just a fraction there, but council learned how much they can save by aquatics. When the pandemic hit, we actually got the city in the black just by closing the pools.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, pools are expensive, so we're, at least $5 million, but all in, more. Anyway, so that's some major, but we could go through some of those capital upgrades, about some efficiencies, and similar to some of the other, where we plan some things for some of the arenas upgrades that come up and that need to be happening. Am I missed anything on the ones that are coming up? Stadium District's big though, and the two new turf fields, South End Community Center. We are trying to start working on Bevan Park. We have a master plan for Bevan Park. We know there's a lot of facility needs throughout. So again, it's something we could come and talk to the group of this committee about, where we'd like to see some improvements and additions there into the new master plan.
Thanks, Mr. Harding. And I've always been impressed with the work of our Parks, Recreation, and Culture Department, because I think our citizens, and I speak for all of the areas, see recreational opportunities as an important drawing card for living here and being in this region. So thank you to you and your staff, and Mr. Osborne, you and your staff, for all the work that you do. And and I really appreciate this committee because I see it as sort of a good neighbor policy. We're all interested in maintaining and enhancing our facilities. We recognize that all of our residents use these facilities to some extent, greater or lesser, and we're all willing to pitch in a fair way and help maintain them. So my thanks to everybody who's here and your contributions. Mr. Osborne.
Sure, just from the RDN side, I'll provide just very briefly on some of the projects taking place because I'll also
Yes, please.
have a bit of dust up with the city of Nanaimo. South Wellington School will be a community center as well this year. So that project's moving to tender, and those may remember this project was, the school district was looking to dispose of the school, and a local community group came forward to ask the regional district to step up and save the school and turn it into a community center. So we're now working with the South Wellington Community Association for an operating agreement for that. And again, the RDN will be the owner and landlord for a long-term lease with the school district 68 in that setting. And that includes the fields, returnable fields, and right now it's a fallow field, but the intent is to get it back to a better standard as well. So that is taking place.
That's East Blunt.
South Wellington.
Skill.
Yeah. We also have a rec coordinator in the Cedar area, Cedar South Wellington area, that will be, is based out at the Cedar Heritage Center right now, as well as those may know Hannah King is our superintendent as well. She's the superintendent of the southern area as well too, because of the work that's coming out of that. And all the peripheral areas of the RDN, she may be called south, but she's also north as well too, don't let the name fool you. Another item that Director Craig spoke to is we are doing Parks and Rec master plan on Gabriola right now, and that's taking place. And that is to confirm sort of the direction of recreation and parks on the island. Again, we're a local provider of parks over there as well, and contract to the Gabriola Recreation Society who provides recreation services, so there is provision taking place there. Related, unrelated, I know we just had a meeting on Monday night, lose track of this week, where there's been local pressure on the island for lack of soccer space, where places to play soccer on the island have been, Roll McClay was constructed by an association back in the 90s for a softball facility basically, and the edges can be used for soccer, if you will. And the soccer field's been on school district property, of which it got overused and not available. So sort of early indications, the local community and through our Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee on the island has been asked to sort of step up and look at more space for soccer. So that speaks to, again, what will take place. Gabriola has, it's an island, so you have space, but it's not as much space to start building these facilities. So I anticipate by the end of this year that master plan will be completed, and then that local community will sort of be setting their path for the next 10 plus years for the provision of recreation and parks on the island. And things like pools come up and so forth, and so that's all, everything's sort of in the engagement phase right now being looked at, and it will be reported back out on and so forth. So just a little touch on that.
Director Stanley.
Yeah, thanks. So to the chair, I appreciate the comment about the South Wellington School. You know, that community center is going to be just down the highway from the South End Community Center. So when you mentioned doing a presentation, I would vote for that. I would very much appreciate that, because it seems like we're kind of creating facilities potentially of a similar nature and not necessarily that far away. So would love to learn more. As well, you know, obviously with Cedar and South Wellington being right next door, I would imagine that they would be interested in using that space as well. The other thing is, and it's not really in the purview of this, but with the sandstone development, there's lots of talk about the impact on Cedar and South Wellington natural spaces. So I know Parks and Trails isn't part of this, but I did want to take that opportunity to talk about the impact of that future development, and future being a key word, not really sure what that's going to look like, but think it might be important to put on the radar because Sandpiper is like, I don't know, it's almost more in Cedar than it is in Nanaimo. So that might, I don't really know how that's gonna play out, but I did just wanna highlight that because I think that when we look at the usage of, with that number of people coming in the area, you know, where are they gonna go for their kind of community events? And so just kind of thought, oh, that's an interesting conversation to just kind of flag for this moment in time. But since we're not there yet, I would very much like to learn more about the South End Community Center.
Thank you. Yeah. Director Melanson.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Osborne, Mr. Harding. I'll just kind of play off of what Director Sam was just talking about with Sandstone. Our communities are growing so quickly. I know Nanaimo is expanding its density rapidly. Anecdotally, Area C is going through something of a demographic shift in certain areas where we're seeing a lot of younger families, and with younger families come increased access to recreation. I think probably the numbers in this survey reflect that. I was actually one of the people that was surveyed anecdotally. I'm wondering if our current facilities are in a place that they can meet that growing demand. Do we anticipate being able to meet that increased usage? I know my daughter and I go to the aquatic center fairly regularly, and it's not uncommon for it to be at capacity when we show up, or to attend Sir Oxman Stadium games and the parking lot is so full you can't get a spot in there. And that's a fantastic endorsement of our recreation programs, but can we continue at that pace of growth?
Yeah, great question, comment, Mr. Harding.
Chair, so I've been seeing for a number of years, but our city plan came out, Reimagine Nanaimo plan came out a couple years ago. But we're really underbuilt when it comes to built recreational cultural space. There's no question. That's why I think with where council's looked at the South End Community Center as a key one, because it's historically been underserved. And then with potential growth, it's going to be even more so. What city plan does identify though is these urban nodes where we try to put our facilities where people are going to be. And so we know that there's going to be, if we can get the South End Community Center done, we know there's going to be also real demand out by the Wood Grove area for more. But there's no question we're under. I've said for a number of years, we could have 3 Oliver Woods open right now and they'd be packed every day. And so that's a scale. So when I'm talking the scale of the South End Community Center, we're looking at a facility right now, depending on cost, twice the size of Oliver Woods. So Oliver Woods is about 35,000 square feet. Right now we're playing with an idea of what the South End of about 69,000 square feet. Now pricing and costs and other partnerships may drop it down to as low as 45. But, still, it'll be a substantial recreation building. We won't have a lot of parks component to it because we want to try to have it in an urban area. But hopefully we can deal with some of the open space issues of the other places. But I don't know if that answers your question, is that yes, we're behind.
Sure. Just in that vein, you mentioned a capital asset report earlier. I would be really interested in future growth built into a capital asset plan. I think there's a lot of space for future development that I have one very young child and another one on the way, and we will need places to take them, so. Especially in the winter time, God knows we would love more indoor recreation.
Well, and I could just add for your area in the South End, it's also the daycare. So we work heavily with the Boys and Girls Club there. They're overflowing with daycare. The school board's putting in daycare. We still know that there's daycare, and that's where we've tried to keep in the South End Community Center quite a large daycare component in the building so far. Hopefully it stays in because of that kind of service too. It's needed.
I'll just echo Chair Thorpe for a moment and say that I personally feel that this agreement is a great benefit to my community, and I think we do a fantastic job working together to benefit everyone involved. I think it's worth its weight in gold. I'm happy that we're all here and the staff does such a fantastic job.
Thank you, Director. Absolutely. And to your question a moment ago, it's the reality of the times that with the growth in this area, there's just tremendously increasing demands on our recreational facilities of all types. And the importance of long-term planning, I think cannot be overstated. But again, our staff are into that, and they're looking ahead and trying our best to keep up to meet the challenges and the growing demands. So,
Changing demographics.
and changing demographics, yes. Mr. Hardy.
But it's not a sour note, but the side of it is that things just cost a lot to build. And so every time we come out with a project, we'll say, well, how little can it cost that much? But we're not making these numbers up, it's what it is. And so, I mean, an example, we just paid off the mortgage for the aquatic center 2 years ago, Wendy. Yeah, and that was, controversial, probably passed by a couple percentage points to make it through the referendum, but it's been a facility to build that facility now, I think it cost us 15 million, probably 60, 70, 80 million to build that same facility. Now, if not more.
At least.
And when we come up with the community center cost for the south end, it's going to be expensive.
Yes, people just have no concept of what things cost. And don't even mention borrowing money in the options there. It's dangerous territory.
Dare we bring up, I have a
Director Stanley.
quick question. We won't mention 3 little letters that are causing lots of problems, but do you have a time frame on the South End Community Center when you're thinking of that would be, you're hoping to have it built or open?
It's Chair. If all goes well with the site selection, I hope to come back to a report to council on the site selection if they accept our offer in March. So then if council wants us to move forward, and it gets back to what does council want to do with Orwell and how we want to fund it. So do we go to referendum? When do you want to do the referendum? So it'll be dependent on the funding model or choice of it.
Mayor Swain.
Yes, that's one of the things I hear, and it's another 3-letter word, is ice. Is there more ice sheets on the horizon? And the relevancy here is obviously there will be a maintenance side or operational side, so I feel that is relevant. So I can get past the chair. But I know I'm not speaking to the capital, but anyways.
Yes. It's in the plans, but I would say it's further down based on what we see the demand for a whole bunch of other areas. But yeah, we're good, right? Depending on who you are, if you're a user group, right? You can, for example, you can never have any between 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night and 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. There's nowhere in the world that you have enough time for anything, right? Because everybody wants those are the peak times. So definitely those times we don't have enough ice, we don't have enough fields, we don't have enough pools, we don't have enough anything. But it's when you stretch it out over the rest of the week where do these uses are. And so ice is one of those ones, where do we see the growth in? So again, it's a big capital, it's one of those big capital ones. I think there'll be depending if I'm still here, I think the next couple of years there'll be a proposal to council on where we do put the next ice and how it would look, where it would be. Realistically, it has to be done. So.
I have a semi-relevant follow-up question through the chair. No, this is actually good, I think. Do we have any stats on like the actual cost per user so I look at ice, for instance, and I know playing ice sports is expensive, whether you're figure skating or you're playing hockey. It's an expensive facility to have. So I'm wondering, like, when we look at the total number of user visits and so on, and we actually, assign a cost to that. I'm curious if we actually have data on what is the true cost of the end user, because I feel it is a heavily subsidized activity for people, and they're not, the end user is probably paying a very small percentage of the true costs to actually use that facility. So I'm curious if we have data or information.
We do, Chair, if I could, we don't have it right now, but we can get it again. Actually, to ice users' defense, they pay a higher percentage than, say, pools is the most subsidized. The most subsidized is pools. The next most subsidized, not as much cost, is fields. So fields are, because our rates on fields are really low. But again, that goes back to the philosophy of Parks Recreation grew out of keeping kids active. We grew out of, inner city issues and upstream solutions to downstream problems of youth. And that's why we invest in pools, in fields and such like that. But pools are probably the highest subsidized. But we can get those numbers again. We just haven't done, I think the last time we really did it was during the core service review. I think that's the last time we went down, we really drilled down to the numbers. But we can get those again. What we can show also is the overall subsidized rate. So pools are 80-90% subsidized. Arenas can get down to 40%. What's your vote? Yeah. So arenas can actually get down. Because they're crazy.
What's the labor costs of pools?
Yeah.
Whereas arenas take less labor. It's about right. Energy up.
Energy is,
yeah.
Our gas bill alone at Aquatic Center, that's amazing.
And then IMO did just revise its user rate schedule this past year, which hadn't been done for 5 or 6 years, I think.
Yeah, I should mention that too, is we do have new fees and charges that are out, that we haven't been able to do that for a number of years. That will have an impact on our net. Our net, particularly not so much this year, but next year and the following year, our revenues will be up. So they'll help out with some of the expenditures.
So I would be happy to sit and talk about recreation facilities for a while longer, but it is Friday afternoon and I'm sure people have other commitments. So unless there is any other questions or comment or other new business people wish to bring forward, I think we're basically covered off for today. I'm certainly looking forward to our next meeting and picking things up from where we've left off here and getting some new information. Director Craig.
Sorry, I'm just circling around just because it's been percolating in my brain about the tables with the green and the yellow. And I know you'll have an answer to this. It just says Bevan Park physical plant maintenance 40%, Bevan administration 15%, facility maintenance. That's apportioned amongst the locations. But I'm wondering, where did those percentages come from?
We seem to be looking in the direction.
Yeah.
So it's allocating the costs overall, so each of those different buckets, so Bevan at the top, it's allocating those costs over the different facilities.
Okay, so it's not that we're contributing to 40% of costs, it's 40% of physical plant maintenance is for Bevan, and then
It's taking an operational cost and allocating over the different facilities.
okay. Thank you.
It's just presentation for, so we don't break it out necessarily in our cost centers across that way, but we're showing it for the presentation of this, allocated that big bucket of cost over all the different facilities.
So for example, Bevan Park physical plant, so that is like the brains of the mechanical system of Bevan Park, but it operates an arena, it operates a social center, it operates a pool. So because you pay a percentage of pool, we have to break down that cost of the mechanical piece to so much goes to running the pool, a percentage goes to running the social center, a percentage goes to running the arena.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, unless...
We haven't scheduled for the next meeting
Yes.
yet, but if we're at I was just asking the committee, if we're at a point where we've moved the South End Community Center to the next level in the next few months, would the committee be interested in having a special meeting just on the South End Community Center? Or we could also roll in some other topics. If not, we probably won't be meeting until November, I think.
I guess my initial reaction is it might be early days to talk about South End Community Center.
If it gets to a point where we've moved it, if in the next few months we've moved it forward on site selection and such.
Director Hammond said it.
I just wonder if we do take that next step as a council, it might be appropriate then to present to the LRB and board.
Okay.
Director Swain.
I'd say no, unless there's gonna be some operational costing information for us, it just seems
Yeah.
not relevant at this point.
What I could do offer then is for the two in the south end, an extension if you wanna connect with me separately, I can give you
I would if it was
pitch.
before June,
Okay.
because I'm due on Canada Day, so.
And my grandson is a candidate.
So, you know, as long as it's before Canada Day, sure.
Absolutely from my perspective, so
Otherwise, Director
I
Sand
can take notes for her and then bring them over when I go visit the baby, how about that?
All right, I'm looking for a motion to
Well,
adjourn.
Could I just say, yes, that if you are presenting to council, I think all of us tend to keep up with what's happening in Nanaimo, but just sending out a link to the presentation on your council page might be useful, because then we can see it.
Good idea, thank you. All right, again, thanks everybody. Motion to adjourn, Councillor Hammonds, Director Melanson, all in favor. Carries. Thanks staff for all of your help and your attendance
So it's
today.
taken?
I should do a presentation, you guys do the
Yeah, no, actually, you have full.
Oh, yes, of course.
So just want to reiterate, if you want to